Don't be somebody outside of the arena that's outside judging and ridiculing, making fun of people who are brave enough to be in the arena. Be in the arena. Be willing to be pushed over, get your knees scuffed, get muddy in your face, and keep getting back up again, because then you'll be doing greatly. This life, it's not a dress rehearsal. It's the real thing. It's because she left her heart on the floor. Boy, oh boy, that's powerful. We need to be willing to be real if we're visible and if we're vulnerable, and we show that to...
Today's guest is my dear friend, Mike Blissett, a presentation skill coach and trainer based in London. He's the founder of Speak Like a Pro, and next month celebrates 20 years in the business as a professional coach. His aim is to help people find their voice, tell their story, and grow their business with online video, and that often includes leaning into vulnerability and tapping into courage. Mike is presently writing his next book, How to Be Invisible. Welcome, Mike.
Thank you very much.
So what is one of the most courageous things that you have done?
Oh gosh, how long have we got? The courageous thing is probably, thinking back probably over my life, is to speak up. Is to find my voice.
How did you manage to do that?
Well, for me, I grew up with a stutter, with a stammer. I couldn't say my name. I couldn't say anything until I was probably in my mid-20s. And so for me, finding my voice was a huge thing. And so I know what it's like not to have one and not to be heard and to be invisible. And equally, I know what it's like to actually find it as well. And the way I found it was I just happened to like singing. And so long story short, in my mid-20s, started singing with a local band where I'm from in Lincolnshire. And that began a career in the music business. So it was about 15, 20 years long in all. And so that's how I found my voice. So yeah, that's probably the most courageous thing I can think I've probably done.
Yeah, I'd definitely say that was. Gosh. So what took you on your journey of being a presentation skills coach and trainer? Is this something you naturally fell into from your experiences?
Yeah, I'd love to say it was all part of a plan. It wasn't. This kind of niche, this area that I work in, found me, which I'm very, very grateful for. It's just that I started training as a coach back in 2003. So you're right, just coming up to about 20 years ago. I didn't know what kind of people I wanted to work with. And so I just worked with anybody. Every once in a while, somebody would say they had an interview or a presentation coming up, and they knew I used to be a singer or, kind of used to be on the stage. And so could I help them with that? And so this presentation skills area of my business actually found me rather than I found it, which is great because that's the area that I focus on now. And I just work with people who want to do their version of that.
That's brilliant. And I think that's great considering people were coming to you already and then you felt that was your area of expertise, so to speak.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm a big believer in energy and the universe. And I think I don't think it's an exact science, but this old phrase, like attracts like, and we attract people that are not a million miles away from where we are on our journey. And so at the point when I was trying to switch my career from the final job I did when I was a singer, in between singing, I was working in a bank. Mm-hmm. And so I which I could do, and I was promoted and it was all going well. It just wasn't for me. So when I started coaching, I was looking for something. And the one thing I knew from working in banking and working on the stage and in showbiz was I like people. I like working with people. And so when I started working as a coach, I would ask clients, what they wanted to work on. And 99% of them said they wanted to switch their career, find their career. They felt like for example, they were stuck in their career or they hit a wall in their career. And I'm thinking, gosh, maybe they're talking about me because that's exactly where I've been for the last few years. And then over the next few years, the people I was working with on their career then started to say, and we've got an interview coming up and we need to give a presentation, et cetera, et cetera. And that's where the next kind of area came on. So again, I'd love to say it was all part of a plan. I sat down and, created a flow chart at some point, but that wasn't the way it was for me. I just was doing what I was doing and hopefully was in my flow, doing the thing that was most natural for me, working with people. And then the niche found me.
Excellent. So tell me more about your business and the kind of people you work with.
Sure. Well, it's a coach, training and speaking business, and again, that's evolved through the years, as things do, or they seem to do for me. The kind of people I work with are people who either, when we start working together, they either have an interview coming up, or they have to give a presentation, or they've been asked by their boss that, to make more sales. And I think for me, sales it's not really about the sale. It's more about the story. Mm-hmm. And so and mixed in with all that, of course, it's confidence, because when somebody says you need to do whatever you do, better, it kind of knocks our confidence. And so confidence is always part of communication and presentation skills. So the kind of people I work with, just in the last few years, lots and lots of entrepreneurs and sole traders or solo traders, mm-hmm. Coaches, people starting a business. I've just finished a contract with a pharmaceutical company working with eye surgeons. Seriously, I have nothing. Yeah, I know, but actually I know a little bit more about eye surgery than I did 2 years ago. Okay. But what I know now is I know nothing about eye surgery. What I do know about is presentation skills and what all these eye surgeons had in common. And there were 27 of them from different countries around the world, was that they needed to share their skill, knowledge and expertise at their various teaching hospitals. And that's where the presentations came in. So I worked with them and I delivered a few projects in schools for sixth formers, so 17, 18-year-olds who need to give presentations maybe as part of their English examination. And what we worked on, they would eventually video and submit as part of the evidence for the A-level, and equally it gets them ready for interviewing and sharing their story and things they've overcome when they come to interview for jobs or university or whatever. So with a kind of doing something you really love, and I really do love what I do, I work with such a cross-section of people. And for me, I do like a sense of variety. And so working with so many different types of people meets my need as well.
And do you find that now, since the pandemic, everyone's been working online, that the reach is better online, or do you still go into places?
I've just started to go back into places quite recently. It's interesting, funny that so many new clients. For example, when we went into the first lockdown in, I think it was March 2020, I had bookings in my diary up until the end of that year. And I was used to flying around and working in different places, cities in the UK and different countries around the world. And then in the next 2-3 weeks, my whole diary emptied up because everybody cancelled, because we were all in lockdown. Different countries were in different stages of lockdown or were thinking about they would have to go into lockdown. And so it was a very fearful time. And so, as I say, my diary completely opened up as far as the training and speaking went. But slowly, as we realized that this wasn't going to be over in 6 weeks, it was actually a longer game than that. People and companies started to switch over and consider working online. And I think over the last 3 years now, almost, we've almost like built up that new muscle of knowing that, because technology and Zoom and online and Skype and all the rest of it, it's not just been invented, it's been around for many years, but now it's become something that it's almost like we built up a new muscle. We know we can do it. We know we can have meetings. We know we can still communicate and work with people even remotely. So I think that the new normal is probably hybrid. I don't think, personally, I don't think the world is going to go back to the way it was before, because we don't do that as human species. We move on. And so I think we are, one of the characteristics of human beings is that we are sociable creatures. We do like to connect with each other, but we're also very adaptable. And so that's why over the last almost 3 years now, we have still been able to do a version of that online. But equally, we do have an instinct to actually start to see each other face to face again. And I certainly do. But will it be exactly the same as it was before? Probably not, because, things like, for example, companies know that the cost-saving benefit of running an event online
Yeah.
is far better than flying people to different countries. For example, just before the pandemic, I went over to Israel as part of this pharmaceutical project, and they flew eye surgeons in from Argentina and China and Australia and all over Europe. And you can just imagine how much that event cost you. We all stayed in a 5-star hotel, and they spent 3 days observing eye surgery, and I did sessions with them as well. And yet we still have done that since the pandemic, but we do it on Zoom now.
Yes.
So I think from a cost saving, exercise, I think the pharmaceutical company has probably seen there is a saving there. And so I think there will still be a value of going back into a training room, into a meeting room, and seeing each other again. And I'm starting to do that in my business, but I don't think it will go back to exactly the same way as it was before. And just one thing that came up through the pandemic for me is, of course, I work with a lot of people who had worked in organizations running team meetings in the morning, and then suddenly they were doing them online and feeling really nervous because they weren't used to doing their team meetings online. And so that actually provided a whole new set of clients, or nervous clients, for me through the pandemic. So hopefully we are going to go back to face-to-face to some degree. I mean, I was a singer for almost 20 years. I love being in front of people. I love connecting and feeling that energy with people. And we can still do it online. We're doing it now, but it's not the same as being in the room.
Yeah, I have to totally agree with you. There have been some adjustments. Everyone finds it being easier online now. And like you say, cost effective is one of the most important things. Yeah. And at the same time, it's great to get out there and actually see people. So it's definitely hybrid for sure moving forward.
Yeah.
You can get a lot more work done as well. There's no travel involved.
But I mean, it's a little thing, but I think it's a funky new, cool sounding word. Hybrid sounds really cool. So it works for me. Yeah. And by the way, I'm doing this interview, and I say when I'm doing my training, I can be talking to some really serious people doing business, whatever it is, kind of training, and I always start by saying I'm coming live from my dining room table, as I am now. This is live from my dining room table, and I see the kind of slightly sort of tongue in cheek, the funny side of that. Yes, we are talking. We're going to have a serious session here, It never escapes me that we have the luxury of being able to do this from my dining room table, or wherever you are. I work with so many people through, and equally neighbors, that through the pandemic were just at home. They couldn't go out to work because what they do, they need to be physically present. We doing this, it is flexible. We can do that, and that's an absolute blessing. So but I'm live from my dining room table.
Absolutely, yeah. I'm live from my office.
Yay!
And it's absolutely great to have that in your home.
Absolutely, yeah. I agree. This is my office now, by the way. Yeah. It's just that you can't see all the mess around me. You can just see.
It's not like the news where people are doing in the pandemic. Did you see on the news people were giving presentations, they were talking and their children were crawling in?
I have done sessions through the pandemic. I've met my clients' cats, dogs, children, partners. There was even I think it was a picture, or maybe it was a video on the news through the pandemic, and it was a BBC News report, and I can't remember the name of the news reporter, but he was in the studio and he had his suit and his tie, and the picture was further away and it showed him under the desk. He actually had his shorts on because it was summer, it was really hot. I haven't got my shorts on today, but there you go. I got my slippers and my jogging pants on. But the point is, this is part of the new hybrid. We can do that. Whereas before I'd have to be on a train or a boat or a plane or something and stay in a hotel the night before and then dress in a suit, and everybody else would need to do the same. And now we can kind of still do a version of that, but we can do it more on our terms, more in a human way, I think. And it is more human to feel comfortable when we're doing what we're doing.
For sure, definitely. So the $1 million question, maybe. What makes a great speaker or presenter?
Oh gosh, what makes a great speaker and presenter? The phrase that's coming to mind is somebody that is real.
I like that.
Sometimes we talk about vulnerability. Some of the people I follow and books I've read, they talk about this concept of vulnerability. And instinctively, as humans, when we feel vulnerable, and sometimes when we need to speak up and present, we feel vulnerable. We feel shy and nervous. And I get that because I did for about half of my life. And so instinctively, we try to pull back from being vulnerable and put a shield or some sort of protection up. And so what we present is the Teflon coated version of who we are, which it's not real. And we can see that in politicians and folks in the media all the time. But then we don't allow people to connect with who we really are. And so when we feel vulnerable, I think the best thing we can do is to lean into it. Is to lean into the vulnerability. There was Franklin D. Roosevelt, the US president, many, many years ago. He gave a very famous speech. You can still find it online. And as part of this speech, he told this little story. And the story was about being the man in the arena. And he said, don't be somebody outside of the arena that's outside judging and ridiculing, making fun of people who are brave enough to be in the arena. Be in the arena. Be willing to be pushed over, get your knees scuffed, get muddy in your face, and keep getting up, keep standing back up again, because then you'll be doing greatly. And I think as speakers, as presenters, we need to be willing to be real. So that's whether that's where it's us on a good day, or sometimes we stumble, sometimes we have a blank, and it just means that if we're visible and if we're vulnerable and we show that to the people that we are communicating with, or speaking or presenting with, it means they'll see us as three-dimensional real human beings. They see the real people. And something I remember from my days in the theater, that one very famous phrase is that this life, it's not a dress rehearsal, it's the real thing. So if we only allow people to see a version of us while we're on this journey, and then we get to the end of this journey and we think, well, but we didn't actually share who we really were, you can't go back and do it again. That's really sad. So I think the thing that we can do, our responsibility of being a great presenter is, and I'm not saying, I used to stutter. I know I'm not the best speaker in the world, even though I get paid to speak a lot now. But what people pay for is me. Stumbling and rambling and funny or whatever it might be. They pay for that, and what they get is not a version of me. They get the real me, which I know I'm not everybody's cup of tea. But the thing is, I do know that I leave those kind of shields at the side of the stage, kind of thing, and I'm completely in the moment, as I am with you now.
And
I think
brilliant.
that probably, So hopefully when I work with people, it's to help them feel more confident that whatever they do, it's okay. They can do it. They can be real, because that will probably mean that they leave. There's a show on the TV at the moment. It's a dance show called Strictly, which I've just gotten into the last few years. I missed it the first 20 years, but Strictly Come Dancing. And somebody left the show last week, and she was saying that she was pleased with the final performance because she left her heart on the floor. Boy, oh boy, that's powerful.
Absolutely powerful. Definitely. And like you say, it isn't a dress rehearsal. You've missed it. Be real and do what you need to. And I think you'll touch more people by that, and people can see through the masks. Like you said, you leave your shields on the side, and it's, that real connection. That's what people want. That's what gravitates them towards you in the first place. Yeah. Totally.
Yeah. I think we all know, I'm thinking various kind of politicians, no names mentioned, but we all know some politicians where we look at them, and the thing that irritates us the most is that even though they believe themselves and they want us to believe them, we know that what they're saying isn't true.
Yes.
They're just not being real. They're trying to be this Teflon coated, I don't know, super species or whatever it is, this perfect politician. And actually the perfect politician is someone that is actually imperfect. That's probably the perfect politician. And equally, there are some politicians that have been imperfect, and they're the ones that we remember as leaders, because they probably dared greatly, going back to the Franklin D. Roosevelt story.
I absolutely love your saying, the Teflon coated. I'll have to start using that. Love that.
You're more than welcome.
What do you think people fear most when they are talking and they need to speak up in meetings or give a presentation? Because let's face it, I'm sure presentation skills is the top 3 feared things.
Yes. Well, actually, public speaking is the number one greatest fear. I think losing your children, your life is number 2 and 3 or something like that.
Wow.
Which is crazy. I mean, seriously. I mean, it's much more important. But yeah, public speaking usually comes in at number 1. Yeah, they won't be enough. They won't be enough. That's probably it. That's the num of it. And I think one of the greatest human needs is the need to be heard. Is to have a voice. And so if we feel that we won't be enough, that we won't be heard, that's a powerful fear to have, I think.
Wow. It's really great, yeah. Are great speakers born or made? Have we got it within us? And can we improve on it? Or do we have to create ourselves?
I think great speakers that you see are great. And there's people like Barack Obama, and I mean, there's been such great speakers. And the reason they're great speakers, and the reason they make it look so easy, is because they put in the hours, they put in the work. So maybe they had a foundation that they were okay, reasonably confident in the beginning, but then they put such hard work in. So I think great speakers are actually created. It's about putting in the work. I think it was a writer called Malcolm Gladwell. He talks about this concept of 10,000 hours. How many hours does it take to become an expert in whatever? And he came up with this idea of 10,000 hours. And whether it's 10,000 hours or 2,000 or 100, because one person's 10,000 hours is not the same as another person's. The concept or the learning I take from that is that it does take practice. I remember when I was a singer, sometimes friends or people in the audience that I talked to afterwards, they'd say, "Oh, it must be great. It looks so easy, being on stage there and singing and everybody applauding, and it's cool." And believe me, it's fantastic. What they don't see is the years before that of training and singing teachers and doing shows, even when you've got cold and flu and laryngitis and your throat hurts. If you can stagger yourself on stage, then you become a professional and you still do the gig. And so it's about doing in the work. And so with speaking, I mean, I couldn't even say my name, seriously. So I think that it's, I think Susan Jeffers, since we're talking authors, or I'm talking authors, Susan Jeffers wrote a very famous book years ago called Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway. Yes. And I think anybody who thinks that somebody like, I know, a great speaker, whoever a great speaker might be, just looks super confident on stage, is because that's what they see. The speaker has rehearsed and trained and practiced, and yet still somewhere deep inside, they're probably a little bit shaky, just hoping that they're not going to lose a train of thought or forget a question, or et cetera, because it happens. It happens.
So really we're saying great speakers, what makes great speakers and presenters is the fact that they actually do the work and actually practice.
Yeah, I mean, it's probably a bit of a recipe. It's partly doing the work, putting in the work, and believe me, it can be really boring walking. I remember when I was a singer and just rehearsing for hours a day at home when other people are doing real things, and you just have to, if you want to learn words, lyrics, etc., you do have to, at least I had to do it over and over and over and over and over again. And equally the same when you give a talk in an organization or to a meeting or conference, etc. You're paid for being able to engage the audience and look completely easy and natural for 30, 40 minutes. And that takes weeks to do, of walking around your house, talking to yourself, talking to the mirror, recording yourself on your phone, looking back at it and squirming because you were rambling and you need to be more succinct. You need to hammer home a particular point that the organization has given to you. And this is all the work that the audience don't see. Mm-hmm. And so for maybe a 20, 30-minute talk or 40-minute talk, it's a minimum of probably 2 weeks worth of just, that's all you do. Like 6 hours a day is do that over and over and over again. So, so I think great speakers are made. They put in the work.
So what do great speakers, presenters do that others don't? Slightly different on what we've been talking about.
Yeah. A great speaker a good speaker will say what they think they need to say. And a great speaker will sometimes say what good speakers would fear to say. They'll go to places. I suppose Barack Obama is a great example. He sometimes he would get angry at speaking to the press when they would ask him a completely inappropriate question, where a good speaker would try to handle the press in a very kind of aggressive way, not show their anger. But everybody knows that asking stupid questions or just bad questions when it's a really sensitive subject, like for example a shooting, and you get no response from that person, they just be that politicians where, I can remember times, certainly with Obama, who I class as one of the world's best speakers. He lost his temper. He got angry. He told them off. And I think, wow, that's a brave speaker. And I think that's an exceptional speaker. So I think and whether you're handling the press or whether you're on stage or whether you're giving a meeting or a sales pitch or presentation or whatever it is, it's going back to that Strictly Come Dancing story as I mentioned earlier. It's about when you finish that presentation, if you feel I left my heart on the stage, I actually showed up. I was the real deal. I wasn't being a version of me. I actually was. In coaching, we talk about being fully present. And if you can say at that point, they got 100%. 110% me. I think that's a great speaker. And a good speaker will just be a version of that.
So that kind of ties nicely into my next question. How vulnerable are good presentation skills in life and business today?
How vulnerable? This is subjective. And if you talk to a bunch of us presentation skills coaches or trainers, you get a bunch of different answers. I think that my own feeling is that one thing I like to do is name the elephant in the room. A lot of business owners and speakers and online businesses, they try to say how they've sailed through the pandemic and everything's fabulous and blah 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 blah, and good for them. That's great. Total respect. The truth is probably different. The pandemic was really hard. It was very difficult. A lot of people got really hurt, and we're still trying to cope with it. We're not out of it yet. That's the reality. It's not as pretty to say, and it's not as eloquent, but it's the truth. It's the elephant in the room. So I think as a speaker, if we can address the elephant in the room, people, whilst it's not maybe as entertaining to listen to, yes, it's honest, and people respect honesty. And so, so when sometimes I give sales presentations for various companies, and I mention that times are really tough at the moment. We're about to go into a recession, or we are in recession. We're coming out of pandemic. Hopefully we're coming out of pandemic. There might be another strain. We might not be coming out. Who knows? But the point is, this is where we are. So the question is, how are we going to get through this? Rather than everything is happy, everything is cool, everybody's... No, that's not how it is. And so,
Tickety-boo.
yeah, so I find that when I started doing this, I made this decision right at the beginning of the pandemic to actually talk about the pandemic.
Mm.
And I was very sensitive because some of my colleagues said, oh, you shouldn't mention that. And clients weren't like that. And so I was very sensitive to it. But unless somebody tells me not to talk about it, I want to be honest. Mm-hmm. And I not only didn't get pushback, I actually got more bookings. Mm. Not because I have any solutions at all, but I will actually, because when we talk about just the latest thing, the pandemic, we're tapping into people's fears, insecurities, vulnerabilities. And as human beings, I think as speakers, we are, on some level, we're the leaders in the room. We're brave enough, being in the arena to do what we're doing now, to discuss. We don't have necessarily the answers, but we're having a conversation. Yes. And people listen to conversations and they get inspired, and maybe it triggers an idea with them, and it helps. And that's all we can do.
Definitely. And then talking about that, the whole pandemic, that brings in technology. And a lot of people see it as a hindrance. So how do you see, is technology a help or a hindrance?
Oh, it's a help. It's a massive help. It doesn't mean it's always easy. Seriously, no. I was doing a webinar a few nights ago, and there's 100 people on the webinar. And they ask questions in the chat box, and I'm asking them questions, and I'm looking. And one thing I like about what I do as webinars is what I took from live training. I'm not the trainer that talks at an audience and reads PowerPoint slides and just tells people things. I like to have I like to have a conversation with the audience. So I'm constantly asking questions. I used to do it in the training room and in conferences when there's sometimes loads of people in the audience. I will still take questions where other speakers will just talk, kind of over people's heads, because I think there's too many people to answer questions. And so in the webinar, I was doing this webinar, and I like to be interactive like that. So I'm constantly asking them questions, and the way they can respond to me is in the chat box. And I was using a platform, who shall not be named, and it was having a tough evening, this platform. And thankfully, the audio continued. It was because I've listened to the recording of it since, and thankfully the audio didn't buffer, but the video was buffering all the time. The chat box, I couldn't scroll for some reason. It just kept sticking on my screen. And so technology can have its challenges. It's not the easiest gig in town, but the thing is, the big positive I take from this is if this pandemic happened in the 1960s when I grew up, before computers, before technology, before all this, and we had lockdowns, and I was from a little town in Lincolnshire, I mean, my world would have shrunk to the street I lived on, to the house I lived in. There'd have been the only communication we had with the outside world was the telephone, which we didn't have until I was about 20. I sound like 300 years old, but that's how it was in Lincolnshire. And watching the 3 channels on the TV, ITV, BBC, and BBC Two, that was it. So if the pandemic had happened in those days, boy, that would have been hard.
Yeah,
the
definitely.
fact is we've all jumped on Zoom and Skype and Teams and all the social media channels. It's meant that even going through a difficult time as we have, we can still keep, to a degree, the connection that we need as human beings, as sociable creatures. Absolutely. And that's a godsend.
It's absolutely fantastic, yes. What resources do you recommend, tools, daily tips, to anyone that wants to start to improve their presentation skills and become a better speaker?
Sure. I guess some of the things we've been talking about, lean into vulnerability. Sometimes when you're asked to maybe give a presentation or contribute to a meeting, and instinctively you make excuses or say, no, and you get shy, just lean into that and just say, yeah, okay. And then think about, okay, how am I going to do it? And so the three things or 2 or 3 things I'd probably think about is plan it. Know that as a singer, as I say, I used to rehearse constantly for years, like almost 20 years, and as an actor and as a speaker. What looks easy and natural and just trips off the tongue is because you put in the planning. what you were going to say. And as a coach, we talk about this mental, having almost like a mental rehearsal. Sports people do this. They run that race. They stand on the podium. They lean forward and have that medal put around the neck hundreds and thousands of times before they ever go to whichever games it is, Olympics or whatever. They have a mental rehearsal. Football teams do it. Baseball teams do it. So we can do it for meetings or when we need to speak up as well. Just mental rehearsal, not mental rehearsal of us worrying and going to pieces and having a terrible time, but the mental rehearsal where it's you on a good day. You're doing your A game, your A presentation. So rehearse that. But rehearse it in a positive way, how well it could go. And then actually to rehearse it, even if it's having an interview coming up, have somebody sit with you, give them a bunch of questions and just rehearse it. The interviewer might ask you some different questions, but the thing is your mind will be it will already have been through this kind of process. It won't be completely unique. And so anything that puts you at ease, calms the nerves, is a good thing. So that's why the rehearsal. And I think with Zig Ziglar, the motivational speaker and writer, many, many years ago, he mentioned this idea, and I try to keep it in my business. And it's this: keep the main thing the main thing. Keep the main thing the main thing. Sometimes in a world where there's so much noise and we're in a 24/7 switched on society where news channels, social media, everything, we can get sidetracked. We can get lost down so many rabbit holes. And sometimes when we need to give a presentation, we need to get ready for a meeting, just quieten all that noise, because there's still going to be noise, but just quieten it, turn the volume down, switch off, unplug from social media, and keep the main thing the main thing. All you're doing there is you're still going to be fully present in the meeting, and you still might stumble and go wrong and have a blank and all this stuff, but at least you'll have put in the work, the preparation. And the chances are you have a better meeting than if you never did any of the preparation.
Fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. I love that. Do you have anything that is useful for the listeners that they could actually take on and use to go ahead in their skills to improve them?
Yeah. So actually it's January. So I've got I do this every January, 7-day challenge. You can start at any time in January, but it's live. It's where I jump on a group call every day for 7 days and share ideas. It's a 7-day video challenge. So it's to get people feeling more confident, making more sense, and just being in the arena, actually making videos, whether they're recorded videos or live videos on Facebook or whichever platform they use, or Reels, and just starting to get their voices heard. So whether that's to just engage with people or build a business or build their list or whatever, it's that. So it's a 7-day video challenge.
That's fantastic. I shall have to look into that.
Thank you.
So where can the listeners find you online, and what's your website, Mike? Yeah,
MikeBlissett.com. That's it. I spent the first 2 or 3 years when I started building my business as a coach and trying to think of a cool business name, because people seem to have really cool business names. And I came up with some rubbish names, seriously. So then I noticed people like Tony Robbins and Laura Burman-Fortgang, who was one of the founders of the International Coach Federation, and Fiona Harold, who's a top coach, and all these people that I kind of resonated with and I liked, and they were really successful. What they all had in common was that their websites were actually the name.com, TonyRobbins.com, FionaHarold.com, etc. And so I thought, okay, if it's not broke, don't fix it. And I can only think of some rubbish, silly, stupid sounding business names. Let's just call it MikeBlissett.com. And so that's why I call my business that.
Fantastic. Thank you for sharing your courageous, insightful wisdom and knowledge with us today. And by doing so, I know you have helped so many others. Mike Blissett.
Thank you. Thank you.
My pleasure. My last question to you is, because we are Create the Courage to be Fearless, what is your definition of courage?
My definition of courage is showing up. Is showing up. You said in the intro that I'm writing a book, and I'm the laziest writer in the world. It takes me years to write books. I've written 4 of them, and it's taken my whole life, seriously. But this one's been knocking around my head for a couple of years, and it's called How to Be Invisible. And the one coping mechanism I found when I was when I was younger, when I had the stutter and I was bullied really badly. I was a short, shy, introvert kid, and I'm still short and shy and introvert, but I'm a bit braver now, I think. And the one coping mechanism I found to try to avoid being bullied or ridiculed or made fun of in class at school and things, or even in my first job, was to try and be invisible, to sit in the middle of the middle row and not be noticed. And that worked to a degree, but the thing is, when you grow up and you're starting a business or you're having an interview for a job and you still find it difficult, and the reason you find it difficult is because you built up this habit of being invisible. It becomes your default. It doesn't serve you anymore. So I think the bravest thing, the most courageous thing we can do is to show up, is to be visible. Because at the end of the day, when people look back at meeting you, they can say that they met you. Oh yeah, I remember that guy. I remember that woman. She was, and whatever impression they had of you, rather than, no, I don't remember meeting them, because you're invisible. And I think the one thing we can be is visible. So yeah, it's just to show up.